Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at Meng's 1/48th scale P-51D Mustang. This is an extremely iconic aircraft, one of the most famous, if not the most famous aircraft of all time, and it has invasion stripes on it, which I always love to paint, so let's go ahead and get into it. Hope you enjoy. As per usual, this one starts in the cockpit. As you can see here, I already broke a piece. It is the actual bucket part of the seat, or not the bucket part, sorry, the kind of backrest of the seat, but a little bit of super glue was able to fix that up. This kit was designed in a way that allows the majority of it to be put together without glue, so the tolerances are very, very, very tight. So there's a few parts where I had to do a bit of shaving off of some plastic and stuff, just to get everything to fit properly, because like I said before, it's designed to be kind of snap fit together, and that's that. I'm not opposed to this, but I still use glue anyway, just because that's kind of my style and I just want to be, extra sure. At this point now, we're just getting a few different things ready for painting. Here you can see me push fitting the instrument panel in place. I didn't glue that just because I was going to pop it off later to hand paint it, because the instrument panel decal, it was terrible. That's the best way to put it. So I decided to hand paint the whole thing. So the first color that's going to start this off is, as you saw there, a light green chromate color by Vallejo. I pretty much use Vallejo paints religiously. I love to airbrush with them. I love to brush paint with them. They're fantastic paints, and pretty much all the time the colors are basically spot on. So, that's good enough in my book. For those of you who enjoy using different paint ranges and everything, I am working on getting my hands on some of the Meng Atom paints. I have heard nothing but good things about them, and I've really wanted to give them a try. So I should be using them within the next few builds, so you guys can look out for that. With the main cockpit floor being painted, I can now cement the rear fuel tank in place. On the P-51D, one of the fuel tanks sits behind the pilot. It might be the same for the A, B, and C models as well. If it is, please do let me know. But in the P-51D, it sits behind the pilot, and then the radio and battery, or the radio equipment and batteries goes on top of that. You can see me getting all that put in place. The reason I didn't show you the painting of the actual flooring section was because it was just my usual black basing technique. And I've talked about it in quite a few of my other videos. So if you're not familiar with the black basing technique, feel free to go check out my other videos. I go a little more in depth about it there. But basically what it is you're modeling the paint onto a surface and then slowly blending it in to give tonal variation. And what you can see me doing now is putting together some masking tape seatbelts. I kind of thought that the masking tape by itself looked a bit bland and boring, so I decided to take some thin metal wire and put it on there to create some buckles. A little bit out of scale, but it definitely creates something else to look at, and it's a lot nicer than just plain masking tape. Here, as you can see, I have some steel wire, and I'm going to be using this to do some scratch building. My first time using wire to really do some proper scratch building, so I'm excited to try this out. There, as you saw, I had some wire that was twisted over on itself. I stuck one end in a drill and the other end with clamps, turned on the drill, and it gave it that kind of braided look to act as the battery wire. I was pretty happy with how that came in. It looked pretty good. It's a bit thick, it's a bit out of scale, but it's nice that it's a little more out of scale because you can see it when it's inside the aircraft, which is really handy. Here, as you can see, I'm super gluing some cardstock onto the front of the battery, and that's to create some bracing that kind of held the battery in place. That was painted green. Here you can see me painting that up. And this just adds a bit more detail and adds a bit more depth behind the seat, even though you're not going to see it again. Here's that little braided piece of wire that I showed you guys earlier going in place. As you can see, it's going to be hidden behind the seat, so I didn't actually give it a real proper attachment point. I just kind of glued it on, and the seat will hide the bottom of it. Here, as you can see, I bent up another small piece of wire and glued that in place. After looking at some reference pictures, I noticed these few little pieces of wire here. I assume they're wires in like a rubber casing for the radios or anything, but if anybody knows what they actually are, please do let me know. Here, as you can see, that little white piece of cardstock, or not cardstock, sorry, that was actually a piece of wax paper, or parchment paper, depending on whatever you want to call it. That kind of acted as a sleeve. When I looked at reference pictures, there was a interior green sleeve that went over that section of the wire, so I just used a bit of parchment paper to cover that up and kind of create that effect. Getting the seat cemented in place now. Fantastic fit here, even with the wiring that I put in there, so I was really happy about that. Here is the forward firewall assembly with the rudder pedals going in place, and my brush painted instrument panel will go on after that. Overall, I'm actually pretty happy with how this instrument panel came out. It's definitely a major step up from the very bland and boring instrument panel decal. It was really bad. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how the hand painting came out on that one. As you can see, I just temporarily push fitted that piece of armored glass in place, and here I am now black basing that same interior green color on the sidewalls of the cockpit. The molded detail here was absolutely fantastic. I was really impressed by this. Yeah, it was fantastic, and it detailed up really well. Moving on to some detail painting now, I'm just going to pick out some of the panels and everything on the sides of the aircraft with a NATO black color. This is a pretty straightforward process. 2 layers of paint were used. I didn't thin them down just because I was using the model air range, so it's already pre-thinned. But because they're pre-thin, they needed 2 layers to really get a good coverage. But yeah, we're just picking some of the different panels out and everything in that black, and then we're going to go ahead and go in with some whites and some reds to pick out some switches and dials. Here are all the panels all detailed up. Very happy with how these came out. Here you can see I put in another little bit of wire. That's because after looking at some reference pictures I noticed there was a wire that lined there. If anybody knows what that's for, please do let me know. But yeah. As you can see on screen, I'm picking out the cockpit with a brown wash. This is an AK Winter Grime wash. It's like a green-brown color, but I think it contrasted against the kind of darker interior green color very well. So that's what I decided to use on the entirety of the cockpit, and it came out looking pretty good. With that wash being wiped off, that concludes a very enjoyable cockpit. Really proud of myself for how this one came out. I didn't use any photo etch or anything. It was all just scratch building and whatever came in the kit. So yeah, very happy with the results. Now let's go ahead and continue on with the rest of the build. At this point now we can go ahead and get the actual cockpit tub section cemented into one side of the fuselage. A little bit of bending was needed to be kind of done here to get it to sit properly in place because there's a few kind of lips that it sits on. But after it gets in there, it fits perfectly, and no glue was needed. Moving forward with the build, now we can get the 2 fuselage halves cemented together. As you can see on screen, there's a few big locating lugs that ensure that you get some good fitment on the kit, which is really appreciated. Something that I wanted to point out here too is the fact that they leave a few sections of the fuselage off, and the reason behind that is so that you can hide some of the seam lines from where the fuselage halves were joined together, which is really handy. Every modeler loves this. It just means that you get to avoid doing all of the sanding and filling and everything like that. So, you know, really happy about that. As you can see here, I have the tail wheel well and the tail wheel strut all painted up. And the reason behind that was because I didn't realize it at first, but the instructions actually dictate that you put the tail wheel in during this assembly process instead of after the fact. I'm normally opposed to this because there's always the possibility to break the tail wheel off, and you know, you have to do more masking and everything, and it can be a bit of a hassle sometimes, but to be completely honest with you, it wasn't too bad on this kit, and it came out looking pretty good. Moving on to the main wheel wells now. On the P-51, the main wheel well is comprised of 2 colors. That silver color that you can see I already sprayed it up in, and an interior yellow, like a zinc chromate yellow color. I unfortunately didn't have this zinc chromate yellow color, so what I did was I mixed up my own with a bit of interior green and just a regular old yellow color, and I think it came out pretty good in the end. It's a little bit light as you can see here right now, but I darkened it down with a wash after, and I think it really brought it all together. After looking at some reference pictures of the P-51 wheel well, I noticed that they were basically full of wire. I didn't want to put every single one of them in because I only have one size of steel wire right now, so I just put in two of the most prominent ones to add a bit more visual interest, and it came out looking pretty good. Here, as you can see, the flaps can only be positioned in the lower position. I'm not opposed to this. I'm actually pretty happy about it because I mean, if an aircraft model, as you guys know from watching my previous videos, if an aircraft model has the option to have the flaps down, I will pretty much always put them down. It looks great and it adds another level of life to the model. But it is nice to note that if you do that, the flaps have to be cemented in before you cement the top and bottom halves of the wings together. I didn't like this, so what I did was I snipped off the top of the locating pin to turn it into more of a pin. It started off as a T shape, so you can only put it in before the wing halves were together. You'll see now in a second what I mean, where I just snipped off the tip of it, that way they can be slid in after the top and bottom half of the wings are put together. There you can see that. And they go in like a glove. In the kit, it's designed to only have them in the lower position. If you were wanting to do this kit in flight, all you would have to do is snip off the entire locating pin and use some super glue or some ultra glue to hold it in place, and it'll look great. As you can see, I'm snipping off the rest of the leftover sprue, like the sprue nibs from the gun part here. I don't know why they left the guns as a separate part on the wing. I think it personally would have been better, or I personally think it would have been better just to mold it as one piece. But nonetheless, they go in at the end, and it's not too bad. The one criticism that I do have of this kit is the fact that where the sprue actually connects to the part, it wraps around onto the section of the part that makes contact with other sections of other parts. So it just means that a lot of sanding is needed in order for the parts to fit properly, but we got there in the end and it looked fine. Here I am now building up the radiator and oil cooler section. This was sometimes called the doghouse, this little inlet section here. This is built up using three or four parts, I'm not exactly sure, but it builds up great and it goes on basically perfectly. A little bit of a gap, but once the flaps are, or not once the flaps are down, sorry, once this is cemented on, the flaps being down kind of covers that up a little bit, and once there's paint on, you can't really notice it at all. Here you can see the actual rudder section is so thin that there's light shining through it, which is really impressive. It just makes it feel really in scale. Here's the forward windscreen put on, and here is the main canopy section being put on. This is tacked in place with a little bit of Elmer's school glue. It's just a clear PVA glue, just allows me to pop it off easily, but it also keeps it in place for painting. As you can see here, the kit comes with the main wheel well door section as one piece. I decided to use this as a paint mask, and the other kind of side landing gear doors that attach to the actual wheel strut were just temporarily tacked in place as well, and that allows me to mask off the wheel well without having to actually use tape or anything, which is really handy. With that being finished up, I decided it was a good time to get the primer down and start getting some paint down on this model. The first paint that I'm going to be using is a neutral gray color. This is going to be black based along the lower surfaces of the aircraft, and then it's going to be a olive green, or an olive drab, sorry, on the upper surfaces. As some of you might have noticed in the thumbnail, I kind of switched up things with the invasion stripes a little bit. The real aircraft, this real P-51, was flown by John B. England, and this aircraft entered service in September of 1944, so just after D-Day, and because of that, it didn't have the full invasion stripes. At this point, the order had been given to remove the invasion stripes from all Allied aircraft, so this aircraft only featured them on the belly of the aircraft, just on the radiator and oil cooler section. Didn't feature them on the wings or on the side of the fuselage. I don't think it looked too bad. I mean, it's invasion stripes. It still looked pretty cool, but I personally love the look of the invasion stripes that wrap all the way around the top and bottoms of the wings and top and bottom of the fuselage. So I decided to step a little bit away from realism and wrap the invasion stripes all the way around. Completely accurate? No, but does it look pretty cool? Yeah. So, I'm not really gonna be too upset about that. It's a little bit inaccurate, but it just looks so cool. So with that little rant out of the way, we can catch up with the build. Here you can see now I'm just blending in that neutral gray color, and then we're going to flip the aircraft over after that's all blended in, and we're going to get started with the olive drab on the upper surfaces. You can see the result of that black basing effect. I was really happy with how this came out. Moving on to the upper surfaces now, going to be spraying down the olive drab. When people think of a P-51 being olive drab over neutral gray, most people will go to the earlier P-51s, the Bs and the Cs. You don't see too many P-51Ds in an olive drab over neutral gray, but I think it's really good looking, and I was really happy to be able to spray this down. So just using my usual black basing technique again, and then we'll go ahead and blend that all in to give some tonal variation. When spraying a darker color like this olive drab, the tonal variation doesn't work as well because you're spraying a dark color over a black primer. So it doesn't work as well, but we'll be able to break it up later with some shading and things like that. Here's that paint all finished up. Very happy with how it came out. Now we get to move on to the exciting part of this scheme, and that is going to be the invasion stripes. As said before, not completely historically accurate because this aircraft in real life didn't sport the full invasion stripes, but I thought it would be really cool to paint them, and I love how it looks way better than just the 5 on the belly. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that now. Just spraying down a uniform coating of a Vallejo Model Air white color, and then I go over it with a NATO black after masking off the rest of the stripes. Here, as you can see, the black was sprayed down and the masking tape could come off. I didn't record this just because I really wanted to focus on getting the stripes as straight as possible. For those of you who have stuck around from pretty much the beginning of the channel, you'll remember that I did the Grumman Tarpon Mark 1, and I did the invasion stripes on that. They were questionable at best, so I wanted to kind of redeem myself on this build, and I am happy to say that I think I did. At this point now I went ahead and unmasked the fuselage stripes. Unfortunately I didn't record this just because, as I said before, I wanted to make sure I got them as straight and as good looking as possible. As you can see here, that middle white stripe looks like it's a bit thicker than the rest. So what I did was I masked off a tiny little 1mm, probably less than a millimeter strip of tape, and sprayed a tiny little bit of black on just to thicken the black stripe up a bit, and I think it turned it around quite a bit. So, with that being done, we're going to move on to some very early weathering, and that is going to be sponge chipping. I love sponge chipping, I love chipping in general. It really makes a model look alive, and it makes the model tell a story. It's awesome. So what you'll see me doing here now in a second is really focusing the chipping on the front of the wing, as you can see here, and that's because P-51 pilots would get on their aircraft by climbing up on the wheel over the front of the wing, instead of boarding or getting on their plane from the back. So I wanted to show that because P-51 pilots boarded from the front was obviously more chipped than the back. So with that chipping being finished up, the aircraft was gloss coated, the decals were put on, it was gloss coated again, and then we can begin the actual weathering. Here you could see me just painting basically the bottom of the plane with a black pin wash. this is an extremely straightforward process, and it just lets all of the lower surfaces of the aircraft get covered in this wash, and then when I go to wipe it off, it basically leaves the wash in the panel lines, and any wash that's left over is streaked in the direction of airflow, so you can kind of pass it off as weathering. You could see I popped the wheel well doors off to reveal that no paint got underneath, which I was really happy about. It's also nice to note that the decals were a little bit clear, so the insignia on the fuselage, you can kind of see the black invasion stripes shining through, or kind of showing through because of how thin the decal is, but at the end of the day, it's not a huge deal, and you can't really notice it that much. Here are the main landing gear doors put in place, and here are the drop tanks going in place as well. It's good to note that with the main landing gear doors, I unfortunately lost the two hydraulic pieces, like the actual hydraulic itself that opens and closes the door. So I had to leave those off, obviously, because I have no idea where they went. So I do apologize for that, but you can't notice it too much, so it isn't a huge deal. At this point in the build now, we can move on to the final stage of weathering, which is going to be some oil work. I wanted this aircraft to be generally pretty clean, not too heavily weathered, so I only did two little panel lines on either side of the wing with a little bit of oil work to show maybe some mud running off the crew's boots and everything. Those of you who watched my last video will understand why I went so easy on the oil for this one. I went overboard on the oils last time, and I'm a little bit kind of, I guess, burnt out for lack of a better word when it comes to using them, so I decided to go fairly easy on this one, and I'm really, really happy with the result. With that being finished up, we can give the aircraft a final matte coat. The canopy masks can be removed, the rigging can be put in place on the aircraft and then threaded through the canopy, which definitely gave me a bit of a headache, but we got there in the end. The propeller can be put in place, and that concludes this build. If you've stuck around this far into the video, I really appreciate it. It was really, really fun from start to finish, and I would really like to thank you for the support. I would like to take a moment to thank everybody as well for the support on the channel recently. It has been absolutely astronomical, and I am extremely appreciative of every single one of you. So thank you very, very much. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand you guys off for the final photos. Once again, if you've stuck this far into the video, thank you. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you guys have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.